Good evening, everyone. Thanks for your patience. I know we're starting just a little bit late, but we had a few folks coming up the hallway, and we certainly wanted to make sure we had an opportunity for them to be in their seats before we started. Good evening and welcome to Focus 203. For those of you who have attended a Focus 203 in the past, welcome back. We're happy to see all of you back with us to continue our conversations. And to those that are new to Focus 203, welcome to our community engagement process. Focus 203 is a direct result of our year-long community engagement process in which our community called for continued ongoing two-way communication between the school district and our community. Our goal through Focus 203 is twofold. It's to inform and it's to listen. That's the two-way engagement. We look forward to tonight's conversation. Our Focus 203 sessions follow a timed agenda with a particular format. Tonight, I'll present to you information about Senate Bill 16 and its impact on District 203 as it's currently written. The presentation will be followed by small group work activity, giving you the opportunity to respond to the information that you hear tonight in the presentation. We also have the company of State Senator Mike Connelly, who will have some comments in regard to Senate Bill 16 as well. As a district, we want to maximize our time to be as positive and productive as possible, while still allowing the free exchange of ideas. It's important to note that this session will not be conducive to the idea of an open forum or debate. It's a work session focused on results and reaching consensus or collective decisions as a group. The intent is to involve as many people that are as representative of our community as possible. Here's how tonight's process will be documented. When you arrived, you should have received a packet of information. Following our presentation tonight, we will prepare verbatim responses from each of the group activities that we ask you to do and an executive summary reflecting the collective work and input of everyone that's here this evening. We'll also post a video of this presentation on the district website, so it is important to note that this evening's presentation and discussion is being recorded. In addition to the video, tonight's presentation, materials, and documents will be posted on the district's website, so we encourage you to go to www.naperville203.org to receive district news and updates. And those of you that are active in social media, if you haven't yet done so, please make sure you like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And we also have a new app that's available for download from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. Just search for Naperville District 203. Just a couple other housekeeping items before we get into the bulk of the presentation. We know your time is valuable, and we want you to honor the time. We want to honor the time commitment that you've made to be here tonight. There are a number of things that are going on in our school district tonight, so I know that as families, some of you made choices to be here instead of in others, and for that we're very grateful. The session will end at the time that has been promised, which is 9 o'clock. We have planned a pretty tight agenda, and there's a lot to cover in this very short period of time. So therefore, we request your patience with our plan and procedures for questions and comments this evening. There will be questions or comments that may not be directly related to the topic that's being studied. So we've placed some I have a question comment forms on the table. If you have a question or comment and we're not able to respond during the small group activity or the time later this evening, please complete one of the forms and turn it in to us at the end of the session. You can also call or send us an email, and we'll have the appropriate person in the district administration get back to you. So let's go ahead and get started. Tonight's session will focus on a piece of legislation that has been passed in the Illinois State Senate and is currently in the House. Senate Bill 16, also known as the Education Funding Reform Act of 2014, aims to overhaul how the state of Illinois funds education. Although the sponsor of this bill in the House has indicated she does not plan to call it for a vote in its current format, we've decided that now is an appropriate time to ensure that our constituents have information about this proposed bill. A subject matter hearing regarding the bill is scheduled for next Tuesday, and I'll share more about that later, and I believe Senator Connelly will also speak to that. I don't think anyone argues that the current state of funding in the state of Illinois is inadequate, it's inequitable, and it fails to support schools in a manner that is appropriate to ensure a high-quality education for every child in the state of Illinois. But what is at question is whether or not Senate Bill 16 represents the comprehensive funding reform that our state so desperately needs. Senate Bill 16 provides no new money to education from the state of Illinois, and in the case of Naperville, School District 203, it would potentially shift an even greater burden on local taxpayers who wish to continue to provide the high level of education that we've come to expect in our community. In recent years, the state of Illinois has become less and less reliable as a source of revenue for our school district. State funding proration has shorted our district approximately $4 million over just the last 4 years. The state of Illinois has been considering and discussing shifting the state's pension cost to the district, and for each 0.5% of proration of pension shift, that would cost an additional approximately $600,000 per year to our district. And now, as Senate Bill 16 is implemented, in its current state, we would lose an estimated $9.4 million in state revenue, or 76% of our state funding, which will require us as a district to evaluate and reduce or eliminate programs or personnel which would have an impact on student learning. Whenever we do one of these, we always want to reflect on who we are. And I think it's a great place for us to start on our beliefs. Our beliefs as a school district is that an exemplary school district values the dignity and uniqueness of each individual. It promotes responsible citizenship and is the result of a collective partnership of students, staff, parents, and you, our community. Our vision represents our desired state, our desired future. Our vision is to build a passion for lifelong learning for all. It's our hope that our students leave us ready for college and career, but also with an appreciation for continued growth, development, and learning. We share this vision for ourselves too, and that as professionals we're continuously growing and learning so that what we do in our classroom represents the best practice based on current research. The Focus 203 premise is built on the commitment to provide you, our community, with opportunities for continued learning about our school district and decisions which impact it. Our vision commits us to this continuous growth and improvement. And our mission is our purpose. And it is what we do. In our district, we educate students to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. And over the past several years, we've seen changes in who we are as a school district, change in what we do in the classroom, and changes in how we are held accountable. But one thing that doesn't change is our commitment and focus on that mission. And what we heard from you through our community engagement process was that the mission continues to drive and define and explain who we are as a school community. Despite all of these changes, we continue to provide a high-quality education and we continue to excel. The slide here shows you our student demographics on the first day of school this year. Student population continues to change. The demographic categories listed in this chart are the subgroups of student populations as defined and indicated on the school report cards. Additionally, this information can be found on the Illinois Interactive Report Card. The percentage of Caucasian students has changed from 83.9% in 2000 to 65.2% today. We've seen increases in our African American and Hispanic percentages, and also note that in 2005 the state changed reporting to account for multiracial and multi-ethnic identities. Another significant change in our student body has been an increase in the percentage of students that are identified as low income. In 2000, 1.2% of our student population qualified as low income as defined by free and reduced lunch standards. Today that percentage has grown to over 16%. We embrace the diversity of our community, and the district will never falter in its commitment to fulfilling our mission for serving every one of our students. This graph shows our mathematics and reading Illinois State Achievement Test achievement scores for the past 2 years. The percentage at the top represents the percentage of students who met or exceeded standards on the test. One of our biggest celebrations is the mathematics increase from 80% in 2013 to 84% in 2014. And that math aligns very closely with the implementation of our new curriculum in math aligned to the new Illinois learning standards, which are aligned to the Common Core standards. This reflects the hard work of our teachers and administrators to implement this curriculum, and we expect and hope that as we implement the new English and Language Arts curriculum, which began this year, we'll continue to see comparable increases in learning for our students. The state also measures how much growth students demonstrate from year to year. Each district and each school receives a growth score where the baseline expectation is a score of 100. Our district showed great growth in mathematics and reading in 2014. The 2014 state growth score in mathematics was 103. Our score was 113. In reading, the state growth score was 99, and our growth score was 108. Our growth scores in both math and reading outpaced every high-achieving, large unit school district against whom we traditionally benchmark our students' achievement. Students in their junior year take the ACT as part of the Prairie State Achievement Examination, which is going to be replaced. This bar chart shows the composite ACT score for students from the graduating class of 2013 and the graduating class of 2014. The maximum score in the ACT is 36. In blue is our district's composite scale score compared with, in red, the state's composite scale score. District 203 ACT scores increased to one of its highest levels in the history of the district. And the high level of education and high levels of student performance I've just summarized is what you've come to expect of your school district. As a community, you've challenged us to continue to excel and to continue to improve. And as a community, we've all stepped up to support our school district, including financially supporting our school district. The next slide, which we have available for you, also illustrates our ACT college and career readiness scores, and those are available for you to review, and you'll see that we far outpace the state. Our successes can partially be attributed to the support we receive from our community. The district receives funding from three main sources: local revenue, such as property taxes and interest income; state revenue, such as general state aid, special education, and transportation reimbursements, and we also receive federal revenue. On average, the state of Illinois provides public schools with only about 26% of their total revenue. But in District 203, the state provides far less, about 8.7%, making our district much more dependent on local funding, about 88.6%. And property taxes, as you know, are the greatest source of local funds and account for 84% of our overall revenue. Test scores, however, are not the only thing that we benchmark ourselves against with other districts. The school district also benchmarks its financial performance with comparable area school districts and the state average. Our community believes in District 203's mission while expecting us to achieve that mission in a fiscally responsible manner. Two of these areas we review are instructional and operational expenditures. As you can see, District 203 is proud that while our expenditures per pupil are just above the state average and less than some comparable districts, our academic performance remains among the best. We're able to deliver a high-quality educational programming while only requiring moderate expense. While allocating resources more successfully than other districts across the state, the burden on taxpayers is lower than most of the benchmark districts among whom we frequently compare. Our district continues to meet current and future financial challenges while maintaining a strong financial position. This past year, the district planned for and will fully implement the Affordable Health Care Act requirements by January 1st, 2015, with an estimated cost of $1.95 million, which is being fully offset by changes to the district's benefit plans. The district continuously monitors changes in state funding as the state of Illinois continues to prorate or eliminate state funding in the face of its own financial crisis. However, it's important to note that throughout these financial issues and challenges, the district continues to achieve stellar financial recognition. The district maintains a AAA bond rating, 4.0 financial profile score, which is the highest rating available by the state, while maintaining a board policy goal of 10% cash reserves. The most substantial form of state aid allocated to schools is through something that is called the general state aid. The distribution of general state aid, referred to as GSA, is determined by a statutorily defined funding formula. In FY 2010, the foundation level was set at $6,119 per pupil. The Illinois State Board of Education's Education Funding Advisory Board, or EFAB, suggests the level should be as high as $8,672 per pupil. For the past 4 years, the state of Illinois has not funded its schools at the EFAB recommended level. As a matter of fact, it's not even funded schools at the foundation level. Instead, it has prorated its general state aid to schools at 89% of the foundation level. The state continues to fund our district less and less, resulting in an annual reduction in state funding to District 203 of $781,204 in fiscal year 2014 and an expected $760,262 in fiscal year 2015. Many sources consider Illinois to be among the worst in the nation in funding its schools. Nationally, most states pick up an average of 43.5% of school funding based on FY10 data. Illinois has chosen a system that relies very heavily on local property taxes to fund its schools. This is the state of Illinois school funding in Illinois pre-Senate Bill 16. In July 2013, the Illinois Senate adopted a resolution to create the Education Funding Advisory Committee. The committee was charged with conducting a thorough review of the state's pre-K through 12th grade funding system with a focus on specifically on state aid. The report was to ensure that any new school funding system would be adequate, equitable, and prepare students for success. The committee also considered things like student populations, student needs, district's ability to pay, transparency and accountability, and predictable results. As part of their process, the committee received input from several state education stakeholders, including the Illinois State Board of Education. Illinois State Board of Education's recommendations suggested that any new formula should address adequacy, meaning providing a level of funding sufficient for a high-level, high-quality education. Simplicity. It should be predictable, and there should be understandable revenue streams. Transparency, easily understood by all citizens. Equity, everyone begins with everyone contributing a minimum tax rate and adjusts for student need. And outcome focused, it should encourage student growth. Recommendations that came from the committee became the context for the School Funding Reform Act of 2014, which is now known as Senate Bill 16. I will provide for you an overview of what that bill calls for. It's intended to create a single weighted formula that combines most sources of revenue a district receives from the state. It is intended to prioritize resources by considering such things as special education students, low-income students, language learners, regular transportation, advanced placement and dual credit, and gifted. Senate Bill 16 does not call for any additional money for education. It does not address the state's history of failing to fulfill its obligation. Senate Bill 16 does not increase education funding. It attempts to redistribute the way in which its already underfunded and unreliable state dollars are distributed to school districts. Here's what it means for District 203. Annual state revenue to District 203 would be reduced by approximately $9.45 million, which represents a 76% loss of state revenue. That's the third largest reduction in DuPage County and the sixth largest reduction in the state of Illinois. The initial reductions would be phased in over 4 years and become a permanent loss in annual state revenue to our district. Senate Bill 16 also includes new mandates which are unfunded. While I applaud the state's intention to discuss school funding in our state, I do have several concerns with Senate Bill 16 for Naperville School District 203 that I'd like to share with you. First, as was the original charge of the committee's work, Senate Bill 16 does not address the adequacy of funding in our state. As you've heard me share throughout my comments, the state doesn't even meet its current obligation, and in this bill, no new money is allocated for education. It attempts to redistribute its already limited and unreliable sources. For our school district, which already only receives about 8% of its revenue from state sources, it would place a greater burden on local revenue such as our property taxes. The bill also calls for new mandates or requirements for our school district, but it does not provide any additional resources to districts to fulfill those obligations, and we refer to those as unfunded mandates. Senate Bill 16 alone would be harmful to our school district, but on top of other concerns, together, the impact on our school district would be quite dramatic. To avoid losses in staff or programming and to maintain our current level of funding, we would be forced to place a disproportionate tax burden on our local residents. The state has fallen short of its current obligation to fund education by 11% through a reduction in our general state aid funds. We estimate that practice will reduce state funds to our district by over $750,000 this year. The state also is also considering the shift of the pension obligation to the local level as well. We estimate that cost to our school district to be approximately $600,000 for each 0.5% of the state's cost that gets shifted to the local districts. Please note that a cost shift alone does not represent pension reform. It's simply a movement of the cost in the current system entirely onto the local school district. We've also been advised that it is likely that the state of Illinois will not make 2 of its 4 required mandated categorical payments for things such as free lunch, special education, and transportation. That will mean our district could potentially not receive over $6 million in revenue it expects from the state during this fiscal year. So I hope you'll agree with me. We're right to inform you of this and that we should be concerned. Next steps, and I know Senator Connelly, if he wants to start making his way up, has some comments as well. We appreciate Mike's vote in the Senate on this bill because it was a no. He'll discuss the current status in the House. There are subject matter hearings that are scheduled for November 18th, which is next Tuesday. Veto session is coming up, and then we'll talk a little bit when Mike's done about creating awareness and advocating for our district, and then we'll put you to work. So, Senator Connelly.
No, it's great. Thank you, Dan, and the staff and everyone who's here. I'm State Senator Michael Connelly. I voted no to Senate Bill 16. I'm a 203 parent. I'm a 203 taxpayer. My wife and I moved here 26 years ago when we got married for the schools. And although our kids are out of 203, the reputation of District 203 was everything that we thought it was and more. And it's incumbent upon me as an empty nester to ensure that the next generation of parents that come to Naperville for the education for their children receive the same quality that my wife and I received. Dan, I give you a lot of credit for giving a lot of the background on Senate Bill 16, but there's also the real behind the scenes background, and here it is. About 1.5 years ago, there was talk about shifting the cost of pensions to the local property taxpayers, the pension cost shift, as Dan indicated. And there was a discussion and a comment made by the House Democratic leader that the suburbs get a free lunch when it comes to education because they don't pay for their pensions like we do in Chicago. So the Senate Republican caucus asked our staff, take a look at the education budget. I mean, every line, and go through it and find out what's really behind this to see if that's true. Because we all kind of had a suspicion that I think Chicago gets a free lunch. So we took a look, and what did we find? It turned out the Chicago Public Schools were receiving a variety of special benefits and funds that were granted outside of the general state aid formula to the tune of an additional $700 to $800 million a year. I'll give you one quick example, and I've got the slide here, and I don't want to go through each of the categories, but one is special education. Chicago has 17% of the special needs children in Illinois. They receive 30% of the allocated funding. They're not supposed to receive 30, they're supposed to receive 17. And any number of the other categories is the same. So this prompted EFAC. This prompted the senators to come up with a bipartisan committee to look at education funding. They met, according to my colleague, Senator Karen McConaughey from Kane County. She recalled 3 meetings. There may have been a 4th that she missed. But before a report was issued, before recommendations were made, a bill popped out, Senate Bill 16. And as Dan laid out for all of us, we know what Senate Bill 16 does. It's simply a redistribution of what little money we get from the state of Illinois to the city of Chicago and to downstate districts. There's a new term that you saw up there. It's called available local resources. I approached the Senate-sponsored Andy Minar, a Democrat from Bunker Hill, and I said, Andy, my district loses $30 million a year. How in the world do we make this up? And this is exactly what he said. He says, Mike, you're property rich. Raise your taxes. Raise your property taxes. And I looked at him dumbfounded and said, Andy, this bill is going to cause a lot of trouble, and it certainly has. But when we talk about available local resources, there are a couple other things you need to know. The city of Chicago, does anyone here work in the Loop every day? Does everyone know what a TIF district is? A TIF district is essentially a district that is considered blighted for redevelopment. So they freeze the property taxes, and as the value of the property goes up, the increment, the I in TIF, is used by the local government, the municipality, to entice developers. The Chicago Board of Options Exchange and the Mercantile Exchange are in a TIF district. Chicago diverts $500 million a year in TIF money that should be going to their schools, but instead goes to developers. In this bill, we ask that that be considered an available local resource. It's not. And this one, I'll leave you with this one, which is the most frightening one. Chicago's pension payment is $260-some million a year. It is backed out of their local available resources, which means we are paying for Chicago's pension payment every year. Instead of it being included in their available money, it's backed out. There's a little bit more, but that's the one that gets me every time. But where are we today in the process? We're in a lame duck period. We're in a lame duck period with a new governor. I was in the lame duck session the last time it occurred, and at 11 o'clock at night in the House, they passed the income tax, and at 1:45 in the morning in the Senate, they passed the income tax. It was signed by the governor at 2 in the morning. At noon that day, I was sworn in for the next General Assembly. Be very careful of January 1 through January 14. You only need a simple majority to pass bills in the Illinois General Assembly. Right now we're in the veto session. Veto session requires a supermajority, which is why we have what's called a subject matter hearing. A subject matter hearing is not, there will be no vote taken. They will take input from interested people. And I applaud Dan and the 203. In your packet today, there's a way to allow you to submit your opposition to the bill to the committee members by email, and I really, really recommend that you do that. They get it before the bill is even heard in a subject matter hearing. The chairman will say there are 2,350 people in favor, and hopefully in this bill, 4,500,000 people in opposition. I've seen some. I was in local government before. I had to live with the Open Meetings Act and FOIA and all those things. The things I see in Springfield are not transparent, by and large. This bill is the least transparent of them all because it doesn't answer the question of education funding. It doesn't really get to the root of the problem. For all of us who pay property taxes, and I didn't like them when my kids were in the school any more than I do now, but I do know that they're important for the schools. A $250,000 home in the suburbs, on average, pays $4,600 a year in property taxes. A $250,000 a year home in Chicago pays $2,400. Chicago has not had a property tax increase for education since 1983. That was my first year of college. That was a long time ago. I had red hair. So there are a number of factors involved. We have been fighting this throughout the summer and fall. It really came to fruition because the Crane Chicago Business Report that Speaker Madigan was meeting with House Democrats to get support for this bill. I think we can fight it. I think we can kill it. The new governor wants no substantive legislation to be passed in the veto and lame duck session, and I have been lobbied on a series of bills, and I've let them know that that is my position as well. And let's have that discussion. Let's stop this bill. Let's have the discussion as Illinoisans on a fair and equitable funding of education throughout the state, not just in the suburbs, but Chicago too. They're Illinoisans just like our kids are Illinoisans. And I greatly appreciate the opportunity to address you. And I'll be around all night and to answer questions. But I'm proud to be 203. Thanks.
You said there was a couple of questions about, in terms of where you can go for some information. I would direct you to the Illinois State Board of Education's website, and you'd go to the education funding, I forget the name of the committee, EFAC, and they'll have information about it. It also has a table of estimated gains or losses for districts throughout the state, so you could refer to that. There were a couple other specific questions I thought that should have some immediate response. One was a question asked making sure there was clarity about its state in the Senate, about the current status of this bill in the Senate. And I'll just remind you from the presentation, it has passed out of the Senate. Okay, it has been passed over to the House, so the Senate did pass this bill. The second was clarification regarding the phase-in. Okay, and it was on one of the slides, and it's in the slides, that it would be phased in over a 4-year period. In the first year would be 25% of the 9.45. The second year would be 50%, 75%, till every year it's 9.45%. But what you need to think about, and this is what the conversation I had with the individual, is the cumulative loss of that. So in the first year, if Senate Bill 16 were to be enacted, in the first year, there would be a reduction in our state revenue of $2.35 million. The second year would be an additional 2.35 for 4.70 million, which would make a cumulative loss to that point at 7.05 million. In the third year, it's 75% of our 9.45, which would be 7.05 million, for a cumulative loss over those 3 years of 14.10 million. And then in the fourth year, fully implemented, if everything were to stay the same, of 9.45 million, representing over those 4 years, a cumulative loss of state revenue to District 203 of 23.55 million. So you think about the cumulative loss. That was an important question and a point that needed to be made. For tonight's presentation, as you know, through the Focus 203 format, the intent is to inform our stakeholders on issues that are important to you as a community, to allow you to have conversation and take input. But what we did also was we made sure that every one of the legislators who represent District 203 were aware of this meeting tonight, and we've heard from all of them, and you saw Senator Connelly had some comments and has been walking around. Representative Jeanne Ives has also arrived, and one of the things that we wanted to do is allow each of them, if they had a couple of comments that they wanted to make those comments. So we'll invite, before we hear from you, Representative Ives to make a couple of quick comments.
Great. Thanks for having me. I represent the northeast section of Naperville, but I live in Wheaton, and for my home school districts, District 200, this would be a $9.8 million loss. And the superintendent raises a good question or point, and that is that it would be like running a $10 million referendum every single year if we lose this type of state funding. And that's the context that you have to put it in. So I'm actually so excited to see the turnout here and the interest in this issue, because it is something that we definitely need to fight against. It's I find it very problematic how they did this, the way they did this, how this came about, the way they're kind of just throwing it together and jamming it down our throats, and I don't appreciate it. Now, I do sit on the Education Appropriations Committee, and we are having a joint hearing with the Education Policy Committee on Tuesday at 3 p.m. down in Springfield. So it's important for me to really be your voice down in Springfield, and one of the ways that I do that is I collect a number of emails that have been very pointed and on target about what this issue means to them personally, so that I can tell people down there, well, I'm going to read to you from my constituents' email. This is how we feel about it in our district and what you're doing to us. And so in that vein, the questions that you do have tonight, if you did have a listing of those questions, because those are the same questions, and I've done this very effectively on the House floor with other issues. I will say, Speaker Madigan, these aren't just my questions. I want to read to you from an email I received this morning about pension reform. And I will read your questions to them, and your questions will be answered, and we will get you that information back, because oftentimes you see things in a new way, or you put it in a new nuance that really hits home. And so thank you for being here, and thank you for being engaged. One other thing that if you want to do, I do have these slips of paper up here. They tell you how to voice your opposition to the Education Committee. They tell you the steps to go through online where you can voice your opposition now that that bill is sitting in committee. There's also on here a link that you can go to sign the petition opposing SB16 in its current form. And there's over 3,000 people on that petition already, and we'd like to get more. Thank you so much for your time.
Some of that same information the representative just spoke to is in the packet that you've received too. So I think what we'd like to do is now to hear from each of our groups. I hope we have an opportunity to hear something quick from each group. So maybe, I guess, if we can just to make sure that we get and hear from as many as possible. Julie Carlson, our Director of Community Relations, is in the back with a microphone. Why don't you tell us, and again, we will collect the pink sheets, which should have all of your information. Why don't you tell us one additional piece of information you would still like to have, and then share with us what you'd say in that 30 seconds with the state legislator about this bill. So why don't we begin? I think we're going to begin in the back with table 14.
Table 14.
So what we'd like is on activity number 1, tell us one additional thing you'd still like to hear about this proposed legislation, and then tell us what you came up with in terms of your 30-second message.
I think we like more meetings, more informational meetings, so that the community can be more aware of this. How are they going to deal with the loss of funding? Is it going to be increased class sizes, the teacher cuts, raise taxes, loss of programs? And what's the most important thing the community can do to kill the bill?
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I did not realize our Director of Communications, Michelle Fregoso, also had a mic. So we can move a little quicker. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Julie, if you're ready with the next group.
Is this on? Well, how and when we heard about it, we heard it through district distribution lists and talked 2 or 3. The additional information we would like is how it impacts our districts. What would the actual property tax increase be should the bill pass, if that can be quantified in any way? What would the impact look like in terms of, I mean, you state that it is equal to a loss of 120 teachers, but are you seriously going to sack 120 teachers? Yes, our tweet would be, my house, my school, my district. These are my assets, not the state's piggy bank. Kill the bill that robs the middle class and our students of a good education.
Michelle, your group.
So our additional information that we would request was initially the same as the table back there, how would our district prioritize the loss of funding? But our next one was, who are our local target representation that who we would need to contact? And our call to action would be, given our 30 seconds, would be fix the funding for the state of Illinois.
Great, thanks. Julie?
Okay. All right, we'll move to table 17.
Our tweet will be retweet, because we've liked what we've heard so far from over there. So we'll retweet. You know, I think it was kind of mentioned earlier, but I think the real issue is what's the real direct increase in taxes per household. I think we really need to know numbers. We were kind of going through the different numbers, and it was a little confusing to me because, you know, 88% of the funding comes from local. If we figured it out, the math right, it'd be a decrease in 6% from the state, so that would go up to 94%. So it's going from 88% up to 94%. What's the real bottom line? How much is that going to cost? Is the real question that we have.
And just one more thing. One of the other comments had to do with what would the, you know, would we really, you know, ax 120 teachers? What we would like to know is, if something did have to be cut, what would be the programs and services that would most likely be cut? You know, what are we truly looking at? It's one thing to say 120 teachers, but what are we really looking at losing? Are we looking at losing, will the class size be raised? And by how much? Some quantification of the impact to the education would be helpful.
Thank you.
Most of our points were well covered already. The only thing I think we would like to add is that this team felt we're all in reaction mode right now, and when you're in reaction mode, you scramble for information. We'd certainly like some more talking points. You could read the bill and all the detail, then you've got what we heard tonight, something in the middle of that with a little more detail and talking points that kind of breaks this down, maybe a 1 or 2 page summary for the detail to help us digest it. We were concerned that something could get this far and almost be voted on when the average person in this group just heard about this within the last 1 month to, and maybe a couple days ago. That's very strange messaging indeed. So we had that concern, and we did not get to form our tweet.
So our some of the facts that concerned us, a lot of the points obviously that we heard here tonight, but I think just the complete mismanagement and unequitable distribution and frankly the rules, local rules versus Chicago rules of state funding and what's being done with that state funding. You know, we certainly feel this is important because we feel that redistribution on what they find is unequitable doesn't really fix the underlying issue, kind of like sticking a piece of bubble gum in a leaking dam. You know, it doesn't really address the underlying issue of mismanagement of state funding. So our tweet basically says under SB16, this causes an unequitable distribution of funds which contradicts its stated goals, penalizes fiscally responsible school districts. And then we ran out of space.
That's what happens to the tweet.
Okay, some left questions we have were, which districts would be the winners in SB 16? And then what are the actual unfunded mandates that they're talking about? How many are there, and what are they, and why were they even made mandates? Our tweet is hashtag Illinois SB 16, stop treating the symptoms and aim for bipartisan solutions. Let's win for the children of Illinois and for transparency for taxpayers and Illinois government.
Well done.
Table 9.
We agree with everything we've heard tonight. One of our pieces of information we would like to hear more on would be clarification of just the general legislative process and information such as, you know, how would we delay things until, you know, possibly Bruce Rauner becomes governor officially, and, you know, just how we can walk through that process as a community. As far as the rest, we would definitely let people know we're against the bill. We want to give the problem due discussion as a state, and also agreeing with a few of the other tables. Why is Chicago receiving special dispensation for all of this? Why are we in this situation? Our message that we created is under SB16, Naperville District 203 loses $23.5 million cumulative over 4 years. The state needs to address the ability to fund rather than inequities.
We had a lot of the same thoughts that have already been spoken. Some things that maybe we would add to that is we're all discussing how to slice the pie, but nobody's asking, is the pie the right size as far as state funding goes for education? And so that, we think, is worth exploring. Is the state, adequately funding what everyone seems to agree are programs that all children in the state of Illinois deserve? And we didn't do a tweet. We actually were talking about our neighbors who don't have kids, and they're older, and while they're not on Twitter, they're on Facebook. So our idea was selfies where people could put SB16 and then their support or a question or request for more information.
Table 10.
Additional information we'd like is hopefully the district is coming up with contingency budget on this, and also, as others have expressed, we'd like to see on $1,000 assessed value what this costs me, so that you can apply it to your own home. This is too big of an issue for 140 characters. So. Well said.
Yeah, I think we had the same challenge everybody else did. There's so much to talk about in a very limited amount of time. We've all heard about this right as early as the vote itself, which I believe was in May, and some of us heard about it just this month. What we'd like to get more information on is clarities on the factors that impact state funding. So, does the bill consider the incentives that this actually creates for school districts to reduce collecting of funding and push the burden back further onto the state? The way it's drafted, it would. And for those districts like Naperville that couldn't make up the loss in revenue, there's actually tax cap limits that make it impossible. So we could never raise enough money to cover the gap. Yet someone else is going to get additional money, and there's no clarity on what those actual outcomes are that are to be measured. So the tweet we came up with really just says that Illinois education funding is the lowest in the nation. SB16 cuts that funding support for some districts and hurts quality of District 203. All Illinois kids need state educational support.
Table 11.
Thank you. We had a number of different ways that this thing was heard of in the past, all the way from township committee meetings, Republican township committee meetings, the newspapers. Some folks got it out of the newspapers. 203 emails were stated as one, but also on the 203 emails, I think there's a lot of empty nesters that don't get that 203 email. And I would sure like to receive one, and I know I put my name in there. I've never seen a 203 district email yet. So that's one way we can get the word out about this thing. What additional information is needed? Like other folks have already stated, I think this thing needs to be reduced down to what it's going to cost an individual tax homeowner for their particular home. I think you need to use the value that's a little higher than $250,000 or $300,000. Try $450 thereabouts. That's kind of an average price. It'll start scaring people. Subtract out of that the amount that they would go to apartments. So instead of using that 34,200 or 328 number, use a number less than that, because those units do not pay anywhere close to what a house pays for. So our taxes are going to go up incrementally. And then I think the other thing that we need to do too that's very important is to, once you add all that up, then let's take a look at the next shoe that's going to fall down there, and that has to do with the teachers' pensions, which everybody deserves a pension, but it's been taken care of in certain ways, and I think we need to make sure that that's equitable, because if that gets thrown back on the taxpayers, there'll be a real large rush for the door. I think that's probably what the group came to. And a tweet, you know, I don't tweet. There's a couple of people here that tweet. I don't know how you get a message out in a tweet, but SB16 does not produce equitable distribution of funding among districts, including District 203. Follow the Constitution and provide, Mr. Connelly, 50% of the funding for all districts. And if we did that, I think our problem would go away, and I think the state would be better served. Thanks.
We had a lot of the same points as the other tables in terms of, you know, what if this does pass? What is the funding plan for the district? And how would that work for us? Because whether you have kids in the schools or not, your property values are affected by how good our schools are. So if our schools things get cut and school quality goes down, your home value goes down too. So while I do have a Twitter account, but I don't tweet, and we were saying that we don't tweet at our table, but one of the things that we do is post on Facebook. So a question we have also is there a link that can be easily shared on our Facebook page on the district, so with action steps that people can do?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great. So that's one thing that we'd like to share on our Facebook pages to get the word out. Thanks. Table 12.
Thank you. We had many similar conversations and comments this evening. One of the things that we felt would be valuable is additional information being brought to light regarding the funding inequities, much of the information provided about funding exceptions made in Chicago. We felt that there are probably people in Chicago who aren't aware of that information and would probably find that quite interesting. So what is being done now to bring to light the funding realities that currently exist and the way the money is being distributed? And in addition to, others have said, you know, what can we do to inform all of the demographics affected in our district by this bill? Our 30 seconds, we talked a little bit about this being a shell game and how we realign the priorities. The EFAC priorities initially stated made really a lot of sense, but clearly what has come of it, this Senate Bill 16, doesn't address the real problems, and we'd like to see more real solutions being created. A tweet potential could be stop SB 16, it's not fair, it doesn't fix the problem, and it will hurt our children and our schools.
Well, for additional information, we started talking about the impact, and one of the ideas was, as far as additional information, show the budget impact, and one of the ways that a lot of times you can do that is what you call a walk forward. You show the before and the after. Before Senate Bill 16 would be implemented, what would be the impact after? So you can personalize the message and have a greater reach, especially to the empty nesters, because I'm definitely one. And one of the ideas was to show what the impact would be on an elementary school-age child. Everybody has an affinity for a child, and though it may politicize it a little bit, it makes a very sudden and deep impact when you're looking at the education of a second or third grader. As far as a call to action, I think the best question we came up with is what's the best way for our voice, our opposition, and to be heard. And we'd look for our Senator, Mr. Connelly, to tell us how to do that. As far as the tweet, very action-oriented. Storm Springfield on November 18th. To fight Senate Bill 16, District 203 will lose $9 million in funding. Join us by calling 630-420-6300, which is District 203's number.
Sending your emails to
Yeah, we have. Daryl, we have some contact information for you, and I'll share that in just, we have one more table, and then I'll share kind of how you can do that.
Okay, table 13.
Hey, thanks. I'll do my best to state points that our group talked about that were different. The biggest one is, what's the proposed solution? So this is a big picture, because this TIF thing, which I don't know if I understand, but if you tell two businesses they have to pay $500 million into the school district, they'll leave, they'll take the jobs with them, nobody wins. So there's got to be a way to get everything fixed. Is there a way to tie the state funding to local property tax in proportion? I don't know how to do proportion, but if it's a $250,000 house or $450,000, if I'm paying twice as much property tax here than they are, how do you tie it all together? How do you take the stuff that's set outside, put it back in? Then take that information and share it with us so we can tell people, this is a solution. We can't just keep saying, no, you can't do that. We have to tell them, here is what you can do, here's what a solution looks like. Was this tied, one of the questions, was this tied to charter schools and all that activity when that got canned? Who was actually on that EFAC panel committee, and who were those people that did that? What is, and we wanted, and I think this was actually said, more information on the downstate districts. We think there may be a bigger impact downstate because they may have some funding issues and so on. And you know, they, in other words, an Illinois kid's got an Illinois kid's right to an Illinois education, and they all need to be treated equal. The 30 seconds, I think, was, you know, obviously the current funding system is broken. However, SB16 does not adequately, simply, and transparently address the state funding. We need a solution, and then we were going to put the solution in there.
This has been amazing input and amazing feedback for us, and we so greatly appreciate it. Just a couple housekeeping items and then some closing comments. Please make sure that you have your pink sheet gets collected, so whoever your recorder was. If you filled out one of the lime green I have a question forms, please make sure a District 203 administrator receives that. We took attendance tonight so that we can make sure we can follow up with answers to all of the questions that you've submitted. Additionally, we will be posting the information on our district website, the verbatim information from your pink sheets, questions and answers, so it's all available to you, as well as the materials from this evening and the video. Before he sneaks out, I have to thank our two current, one soon to be, representatives in Springfield who are here with us tonight. Senator Connelly, Representative Ives, and Representative-elect Grant Worley from the 41st District in the back, who's been here also. We appreciate you being here to hear our voice and take our voice with you down to Springfield. You received also, when you came in, a sheet on legislative impact, so you have that information about impact on District 203. On the next page, you have information about how you can submit testimony for the subject matter hearing. Representative Ives also brought half sheets that you would be able to pick up. And additionally, you have contact information for the legislators who represent you in our school district, as well as General Assembly Education Committee members. And as you'd heard from the Senator, those would be the contact information sources that you would want to get to. We're getting done a little bit early. I'll take a hand here in just a second, but we'll all be around for questions and answers. Yes. Thank you for that. Jeanne? Yep, we'll post it, and yep, you'll have it posted as PDF. Good night, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your engagement.